Welcome everyone. Welcome to this webinar from the Regenerative Collaborative South Africa on new buildings SANS10400 XA and net zero. My name is Marloes Reining and I'm a director of the Regenerative Collaborative, and I will be facilitating this session for you guys today. So first of all, I'd like to start off with thanking the sponsor, Schneider Electric, and we're very happy and very grateful that Schneider Electric wants to sponsor this, and this really covers the cost of having it CPD validated. So thank you very much. And I'm going to play a video.
The world is full of people telling you who to believe they are. Well, we thought we'd tell you who we're not. Let's start here. We're not in shipping. We don't make lifts. Seriously, no lifts. We do this. We're good at this. And we make all of these. And even though you'll find us here and here, we don't make energy. We make you save it. And you'll be saving the environment too. Are we an internet company? Well, we connect and power just about everything around you, helping machines talk to each other and to you, making your world more personal. We're seeking out the big questions and answering them honestly. Like, how can we make the most of our energy and resources? Or can we make access to energy and digital basic human rights? We're real people, employees, developers, partners, investors, and inventors, all passionate about doing what's right. We're open, humans of all sorts from all over, learning from each other and about each other. We're not here to save the world. It'll go on with or without us. We're here to be your digital partner for sustainability and efficiency, to ensure life is on everywhere, for everyone at every moment.
Great. So thanks again to Schneider Electric for sponsoring. Okay, so this is a question on the quiz form. Who's organizing this webinar? That's obviously the Regenerative Collaborative of South Africa. If you want to join us, we are a volunteer organization, a non-profit organization, and we mostly organize and trying to spread the word around regenerative design and regenerative buildings. So we do organizing these events. So every month we have an event like this, and we also do advocacy and education, creating awareness and running our social media platform. So if you want to follow us, find us on Facebook or on LinkedIn, or drop us an email. If you want to look at one of our previous events, they are all on the website of Greenet. So that's www.greenet.co.za/RCSA, and they're still available for CPD points. So if you're in need for CPD points, just check them out on the website. From here, we're going to start with the presentations, and the first up will be Coville. He's a civil engineer working for Solid Green for the last 9 years. And he's been involved with the development of the SANS10400 Part XA standard. So he's going to be talking about and telling you what the new version is all about. Then he will be followed by Okkie Momberg, who's from Schneider Electric, and he is an experienced electrical engineer. And he will be talking about decarbonizing buildings. So that's also going to be very interesting. And then last up, we have Kedibone Modiselle. And she's from the city of Tshwane, and she's going to talk to us about what the city is doing to create greener buildings and how the city is dealing with getting to net zero for new buildings. So I'm going to hand over here to Dash, and then we will have time for questions and answers at the end.
Okay, great. Thanks, Marloes, and thank you to everybody for joining today. Looking forward to it. So yeah, just a bit of background. My name is Coville. I work with Solid Green Consulting, but more importantly, I head up the Solid XA division within Solid Green, which is the department where we assist clients in demonstrating Part XA compliance through this rational assessment approach. So today I'm going to be talking through SANS10400 XA and the journey to net zero. So I guess a good starting point is to understand where we're at now, where we've come from, and where we're going to. And so to that, we are now in 2022, and because of that, SANS10400 Part XA 2020-21 is applicable. And so we are now following through on that standard in terms of Part XA compliance. This was developed from the SANS10400 Part XA 2011 version. So it took 10 years to get out the second version, edition 2. And I guess the important thing is kind of understanding. So we are now at the 2021 version, and there are these goals, global goals, local goals for net zero, all new buildings, all new buildings to be net zero by 2030. So it's just trying to understand, where are we, and is that achievable? Are we on track for that? So maybe taking a step back, there, just in terms of what the standard requires, there are 3 compliance methods with SANS 2021. There are 2 that fall under rational assessment, and 1 that falls under a deemed to satisfy approach. The rational assessment approach, the first rational assessment approach, is where you demonstrate through simulation software that your actual building your planned building is going to perform better than energy tables, performance tables that are listed in the SANS standard. The second approach is that you demonstrate that your actual building, your modeled building, again, modeled routes, it performs better than another modeled building, but built to the SANS deemed to satisfy kind of requirements. And then the final way of demonstrating compliance is to go through a deemed to satisfy approach, where you follow a prescriptive compliance method where you apply the standard. And to talk to those in a little more detail and what they are, deemed to satisfy and rational assessment, I'll start with deemed to satisfy. So this is where, in the standard, there will be various building elements that need to be factored in. And the deemed to satisfy approach means that, for example, your roof construction now requires that you have to have an R value of 3.7. And if you meet that R value of 3.7, you get a tick and you can move on. You move on to, for example, your fenestration, so your glazing. If you've got shading, that factors into it, but you need to, depending on what sort of glazing ratio that you have, you need to have a certain performance. And if you have that performance, you are able to then tick that box and kind of move on to the next step and so on until you ticked all the boxes and you are then able to demonstrate your Part XA compliance. Whereas the rational assessment approach enables you to introduce all those various factors into a model simulation. And that simulation software needs to be Agrement certified, so it needs to have certain requirements that deem it a valid simulation software package that can output the results that we'll be looking at. But what it means, though, is that you're able to plug in all these different variables, and depending on the outcome of that, you would either be in compliance. So if you're comparing your energy use or energy use intensity at the end of the day to the tables, the SANS tables, if you're less than them, you are compliant. If you're higher than them, you're not compliant. Or if you're doing it to the reference building, if you're lower than the reference building, you are compliant. Or if you're higher, you're not. But what it allows is that your roof R value, for example, could be at 3, but your glazing could be at a much higher performance than what's prescribed in the standard. And overall, your building could actually perform a lot better than what that deemed to satisfy approach would lead to. And so that's the idea, is that you look at the building comprehensively and you're able to make a rational assessment of how the building performs, which can lead to then demonstrating compliance. But now that's all, it hasn't changed from 2011. So I want to now take you guys through some of the changes that have taken place. Importantly, for both the deemed to satisfy and the rational assessment approach, the climate zones that we knew have been changed to energy zones. But not just that there's a name difference, but they've actually changed up. There were 6 climate zones, there are now 8 energy zones. So that's important for both the deemed to satisfy approach and the rational assessment approach, because you need to have those defined kind of reference points that you compare yourself to. So that's important to note. Then specific to deemed to satisfy, the glazing tables have changed quite significantly and seemingly simplified the process from a deemed to satisfy approach in terms of the person doing the fenestration calculation perspective. Also, from a roof insulation perspective, there have been changes to that, for example, where now instead of there being varying insulation or R-value requirements for different zones, climatic zones or energy zones, it's now pretty much constant at a 3.7 R-value, aside for a new energy zone 5H, which is where Durban is kind of high humidity zones, which is at 2.7. Some of the changes from a rational assessment approach are there's updated energy benchmarks. There are more building types that are covered in those energy benchmarks. And then finally, there's also an energy trajectory that's being proposed. So in the presentation, I'm going to go into a little more detail on the rational assessments and some of the changes there and the energy trajectory. So if we look at SANS10400 XA 2011, this is the energy use intensity table, or the maximum annual consumption for building. Classification that was in the 2011 standard, and there were seven different types of building classifications that would have an energy use that you could compare it to through a rational assessment approach, compare your building's performance to those tables. Now there are a significantly higher number of classification types that you can compare yourself to, which is great. And then just also to that is these changes to the climate zone, energy zone. That it's important to know where your building is situated to be able to place it and reference it correctly. Okay, but what does that mean? How does that actually look? What are those changes and are they meaningful? So this is just a summary of those changes, where the blue bars are the 2011 benchmarks, energy use intensity benchmarks, and the green is the 2021 version. And so, and also this is each bar or each grouping is for each of the metros, so Johannesburg, Pretoria, Cape Town, and Durban. And you can see that the drops from 2011 to 21 are significant. With Joburg, for example, 55% drop. That sounds like a lot, but is it? What was that original benchmark? Was it good, and therefore is the now 2021 version super stringent, or where do you stand? This is just going into a bit more detail into Joburg and what that change was. So the 2011 version had a 200 kilowatt hour per meter squared per year benchmark. Now it's down to 90 kilowatt hours per meter squared per year per annum. And so, again, is that a big change, or is that a stringent change? Is it going to be hard for projects to meet that requirement? But then also considering where we have to get to for 2030, are these changes taking us there? Okay. Moving on to the energy trajectory. This is from the standard. And it states the proposed energy trajectory is to achieve 8% reduction on previous maximum energy demand and maximum annual consumption every 2 years. So again, that sounds good. That sounds great. But what does it actually mean? How, with the limited time left, is that enough to get us there? And I think importantly to this is to get us where. What is net zero? So just a recap on this. I'm sure this is well known these days, but what is net zero? And it's when the total building energy use is equal to the total building energy generation. So the ability for a building to be as efficient as possible so that it can offset its energy use through renewables or some sort of offset, renewable offset. And so in that first current situation, with the green bar being way higher than the blue bar, that's not right. That is not net zero. And the energy use of the building is way higher than the energy generation, therefore it's not net zero. In the second, they are both equal and therefore net zero. So that's just very basically put, but that is what net zero is. So is that trajectory getting us there? And so this is now looking at that energy use, where we stand now, applying that 8% reduction and seeing how we progress. So the green bar being 2021, then the grey bar being in 2025, where we should be, and then in 2030, where we should be. And so at 59 kilowatt hours per meter squared per annum, is that enough? Is that building efficiency good enough to then get us onto that net zero environment. And I think before we can answer that, we have to understand, well, what are those values including or importantly excluding? And to that, it's important to make this note is around XA energy benchmarks do not correlate to operation. It is a modeled approach. It is trying to inform design, or it is at the building plan approval stage. And so it's before the building's operating, before the building's, we are actually going to where you get that municipal bill. And so you're trying to predict what that energy use will be. And in that prediction, there's an exclusion of plug loads. Then if you are applying a rational assessment method to demonstrate compliance, you would make certain operational schedule assumptions. You'd also apply broad heating and cooling set points, 19 to 25 degrees C. So again, I ask the question, is this enough, that 59 kilowatt hours per meter? And I think it's then important to move away from the standards and look at then what is best practice and what are these objectives that are being set and guidance that's being given. And so there's a great publication, Getting to Zero, a guide to developing net zero carbon buildings in South Africa, which was initiated and led by the ASHRAE South African chapter with input from, and it's important this list as well, C40 South African, Sustainable Energy Africa, GBCSA, the Green Building Council of South Africa, eThekwini Municipalities Energy Office, and Agama Energy. So it's a document that can be valued, and in terms of their guidance, the total building energy use should be around 67.5 kilo in Joburg. This is Joburg specific, but they don't differ that much across the different metros. 67.5 kilowatt hours per meter squared per annum, and so that's comprehensive. And so then looking at that 59, it doesn't seem to be stringent enough. It is close, but it's not quite there. Yeah. So then why is the rational assessment approach a good one? And I think it's important to note, there are all these benefits that can come out of that process. So as soon as you start the simulation process, you can really look at performance and thermal comfort performance, daylight performance being key factors that can influence the outcome of a net zero building. And so that's an outcome, but does that really link to this net zero goal and SANS? No, but the important thing with the rational assessment is that you get an energy use intensity value from your building design, and you can relate that then to best practice, to these guides from Getting to Zero, ASHRAE's publication, or simply SANS, and it's this guidance around building performance and making sure that you have something to inform your design decisions around. And so that is the importance of going through this rational assessment approach and a nice outcome to it. And so although those benchmarks are, the energy trajectory is proposed, I believe that it's in the right direction, and hopefully it being proposed means that it still has the ability to tighten up a little and really close in on enable that 2030 vision to be met. So I'm just going to close off with a quote that Chilu Momberg often puts in his presentations. Chilu's a director at one of the owners of Solid Green Consulting. And I just always think it's such a valuable quote from Paul Hawken. And it's the first rule of sustainability is to align with natural forces, or at least not try to defy them. And I think if that's a takeaway to all those architects, all those developers, this is that vision can be met, provided we don't try and defy the space in which we build these buildings. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dash. That was great, perfectly on time. If you have any burning questions for Dash, just put them in the chat box, and then after the other two presentations, we'll have probably a half an hour to go for question and answers. So great, thank you so much. I'm gonna ask Okkie to share his screen and do his presentation.
Hi everyone. Thanks for joining again. Thanks, Marloes, for the opportunity. As mentioned, my name is Okkie Momberg. I'm the prescription manager for Schneider Electric in South Africa. And what I'm going to be sharing with you in the next 15 minutes or so is a broad roadmap of realizing decarbonisation in buildings. So just the agenda, so we'll look at the decarbonisation roadmap, and this includes the 4 steps, which are pretty much defining the success, setting targets, deploying the solutions to achieve these targets, and then to sustain the results. So when we look at the process, decarbonisation takes a relatively straightforward path. It's not to say it's easy. Each step in the path can pose significant challenges, and it requires technological, financial, organizational, and governance capacity. Fortunately, the new solutions and financing models which are becoming available make decarbonized tech more accessible, effective, and more affordable than ever. So it's important to note here that the steps can happen in parallel at any point and are iterative. So fluctuations in organizational resource demands can result in changes that impact the decarbonization goals and timelines. So the pathway isn't linear, it's circular. There are always greater steps organizations can take to help themselves or others become more efficient or more decarbonized. So whether you're setting portfolio level targets, designing a new building, or looking at sustainable retrofit opportunities, the steps you take remain the same. So first off, let's dive into defining success. So the expression you can't manage what you don't measure is as true for decarbonization as any other organizational metric. Organizations or developers must understand from the beginning where they are today on their decarbonization pathway and what it is they aspire to achieve. Leaders across an organization must align on the vision and the strategy to achieve that vision. This really is a foundational element in any program of change. So how do you define success? Market intelligence and trends. You need to perform in-depth market research to either help yourself or your clients understand the competitive landscape of their industry and the available opportunities anywhere in the world. Benchmarking and footprint assessment talks to measuring your baseline emissions and developing an understanding of the volume and type of emissions by source. The ongoing measurement of this emissions data enables you a single source of reporting truth, even whether it's across 1,000 sites. Then stakeholder and engagement journey mapping. So we need to identify and engage the right organizational stakeholders in a strategic discussion to make sure that the desired outcomes are aligned with the organization's commitments. Then finally, digital solutions offer this platform and solutions from device level connected products to edge control software for building power and microgrid management to digital services, apps, and analytics to help you continually optimize throughout the entire life cycle of this building. So stage 2, here we're setting targets. So the type of decarbonization targets that an organization, a developer or facility manager sets, and the timeline to achieve those targets is crucial. It's crucial to the overall success of any decarbonization program. So, it was once in vogue to set a generic reduction target based on either the overall emissions or emissions profile of your products or services. But today, the most ambitious targets are aligned with climate science. So research that Schneider Electric has performed with some of its partners has also found that it's essential for organizations to publicly announce their decarbonization and energy targets. Publicly announced targets are more likely to help the organization seek more ambitious reductions. It'll move the organization faster towards their goals, and it creates greater confidence in the public that the organization will actually achieve these goals. So how do you set your targets? Firstly, you need to analyze the risks and opportunities. You need to assess and predict the potential upsides and downsides of decarbonisation to set these ambitious yet achievable goals. The emissions roadmap development and design, you need to develop and map decarbonisation programs by identifying your target scenarios, key performance indicators, and funding opportunities. And you need to make sure that you partner up with the right sustainability partners to help you publicly announce your clients' targets and to validate and report on their progress through the leading indices. So stage 3 is where most of the decarbonisation takes place, and this is where we deploy the solutions. Now there are 7 different stages that we've put as part of deploying solutions, but there can be many more. First off, optimizing procurement. For most organizations, developers, facility managers, again, energy is one of the most significant and most volatile operational expenses. Managing these resources proactively is essential. You need to make sure that you have sustainability partners who are able to support their clients in procuring, managing, and balancing their energy and carbon portfolios. This includes global commodity risk and analytics advisory services, competitive sourcing of energy and contract management, tracking and supervising of the energy performance and billing. This also relates to invoice and rebate reconciliation, and expert knowledge of the global tariffs and regulatory trends to optimize for this energy procurement. Then we look at reducing energy through digitalization and operational efficiency. We need to create smart, digital, and efficient buildings with the following building and power management solutions in place. BIM and digital twin, connected products that serve data directly to the cloud. Edge control, building and power management software, and then predictive analytics and digital services sitting behind that for improved asset performance. Then we leverage electrification to replace carbon-intensive energy. So organizations can achieve significant carbon reductions and potentially budget savings and stability through fuel switching or low carbon replacement. This replacement can take a variety of forms, including renewable energy, alternate fuel sources, and electrification, of course. Then finance your sustainability initiatives. Energy as a service systems are becoming more and more accessible. These systems are for commercial, industrial, and infrastructure sectors, and are backed by performance-based energy service agreements that in many cases require no upfront costs. Then connect with other trusted sustainability partners. At Schneider Electric, for example, we have an eco-expert program, which represents a worldwide ecosystem of more than 4,000 partners and solution providers. Each of them are trained and certified by Schneider on our EcoStructure platform and equipped with this cross-expertise skill set that spans building and residential automation, power distribution, and management. These eco-experts have a deep understanding of the criticalities that their customer face when it comes to efficiency and sustainability in their buildings. Then we'll always have to balance the unavoidable emissions that cannot be reduced. So despite the best technical advances to date, some emission sources do not yet have a means to achieve carbon reduction through replacement or electrification. For example, jet fuel can't be replaced with a low carbon fuel at scale, and aviation remains a highly carbon intensive industry. So any organization that use air travel as part of their operations are then accountable for the emissions generated through that activity. This organization must then address these emissions through balancing mechanisms like carbon offsets, making sure make sure your sustainability partner can provide you with the best-in-class sourcing and management of your energy attribute certificates, and as a global portfolio of highly credible, verified emission reduction projects, using technologies from forestry to landfall to gas capture and flaring. Then finally, supply and value chain initiatives. For many organizations, the largest emission source lies within their supply and value chains, outside of their direct control, of course. So organizations that lead the charge know that true carbon neutrality can only be achieved by engaging, encouraging, and empowering their suppliers and partners to reduce their emissions within their own organizational scope. The programs and services that are available are very much the same as what we mentioned earlier. Then stage 4, sustaining results. So emission reduction programs, once they set into motion, require consistent attention to ensure they are performing as expected. Market forces, legislation, regulation, technological advancements, organizational growth, and financial changes, all of these can impact these programs. So organizations must consistently monitor, measure, adjust, and optimize to sustain their decarbonization efforts. Doing so allows a company to communicate their progress confidently to their internal and external stakeholders, which advances its reputation and influencing in its ecosystem. So how is this achieved? Look at performance tracking and analytics. We need to monitor the real-time performance of these solutions and resources. We need to track the operational performance of our renewable and clean tech assets to make sure they're operating as expected, both from a generation point of view as well as a financial point of view. Then internal and external reporting. Processes that need to be in place there are marketing, communication services, and this enables the client to engage easier with its clients and peers. And then, of course, green building certification. Make sure that you have the right experts on board who can help you understand the specific areas of certification and how those solutions can help you achieve points toward the certification. Then to conclude, just one last look at the model. So we start by defining what success looks like for an organization, whether it's a specific project or overall. Set the targets and make sure we announce them publicly to drive our commitment. Then we deploy the correct solutions to ensure the targets we set are achieved, and we sustain these results by tracking our performance and iterating the process. Again, the pathway isn't linear. A lot of these processes can run in parallel, but the pathway is circular and it is very iterative in nature. So thank you for your time. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any further questions or want to open up another discussion.
Great, thanks, Okkie. That was very insightful. Good process to follow if you want to decarbonize. I guess you can apply it to many things. That's a good thing. Great, Kedibone, I see you've shared your screen already. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mariluz. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and it is great to be with you today in this discussion. Quite interesting as always, as we share on these ideas of what is net zero, what is it all about. So my duty today is to share on what South African cities, and I will say South African cities because Tshwane has been part of a collaboration with 4 other metros in South Africa. So I will be sharing on what South African cities, particularly looking at City of Tshwane, Cape Town, and Johannesburg and eThekwini, on what we've been doing around the net zero transition in the built environment. As part of the C40 cities, as I've said, the 4 cities are part of C40. In 2018, the 4 metros joined the C40 South African Buildings Program in 2018. And in that same year, the cities also signed on the net zero carbon building declarations, where the cities were committing on operation of new buildings to be net zero by 2030, and all buildings old and new to be net zero by 2050. So as you can see, our metros are part of the global cities that have committed to this net zero. Of course, this is a huge commitment for the cities, given the challenges, of course, that we face generally, but it is cities that are in the forefront. So we need to make sure that we are more ambitious in terms of the work that we want to achieve. I thought with this, in joining the program, it was important, however, to have context and baseline on what it means for cities to commit to net zero, and the context had to start, of course, in terms of where we are on compliance related to national building regulations related to building efficiency. And we then commissioned studies looking at our compliance to standards such as the SANS10400 XA. And I think Dash presented on that. So that baseline then, when we started, was based on the 2011 vision of SANS. And we thought that would be important before proposing any other efficiencies in building over and above the SANS XA standard. We needed to make sure that we are compliant in terms of that, as that was the first standards in terms of energy efficiency that we needed to make sure that we are complying with. With the studies, actually, Cape Town was the first to do the study, and we actually, as the 3 cities, then learned from Cape Town. And the baseline then informed what we are currently doing or are finalizing in terms of the policy and bylaw developments. I will share on this later on in my presentation, especially in the context of City of Tshwane. So with the development of those policies and bylaws, we also needed to make sure that we are aligned with other existing national policies that are around sustainability and climate change. And those at the bottom of the screen now are the ones that we had to align with to make sure that we are not out of the context in terms of what South Africa needed to achieve when it comes to sustainability. I think maybe before I go further in terms of where we are, I just thought with this slide, I should also bring some context to the work we are doing as part of C40 Cities, looking into the report that was done or developed by C40 and Arab on the importance of cities in reducing carbon emissions. So cities, as you know, are economic hubs, are closer to communities, that is residents and businesses. And it only makes sense that cities create an enabling environment through policy and service delivery mandates to try and cap greenhouse gases that we see in the built environment. And as indicated, city can, as we can see on the slide, cities can contribute up to 40% of what has been committed by countries according to through the Paris Agreement in reaching a net zero. So as I said, we are at the forefront. So as cities, we need to make sure that whatever policy that we develop aligns to what our country has committed to. So also just in terms of if we are not doing anything, or should cities not be in the forefront and we continue with business as usual, by continuously using the current electricity grid to power our buildings, with no policy to guide the transition, I think this will result in increased greenhouse gases. And as you can see on the slide, the emissions will then double by 2050 if we are not actioning in terms of moving away from business as usual. So as cities, we have seen this type of reports that there is some ambition, that there's some level of ambition that we actually need to take to make sure that we reduce those carbon emissions within different building sectors. So I'm not gonna touch a lot on this because I think Dash and Okkie have already elaborated on net zero. I'm not going to reinforce much on this, but just to say getting to net zero is a stepped approach. And there is a lot of work that needs to happen to ensure that it is implemented by starting with low-hanging opportunities on energy efficiency in buildings. So as we step up, we need to make sure that we don't only just try to reach net zero by emissions offsetting, but start at the beginning in terms of where we are energy efficiency and then scale up. In terms of the policy development and the bylaws on net zero policy development, the 4 cities, after having done all the baselines I've mentioned, are currently developing or have developed the policies that will enable or assist the drive to net zero. I just thought maybe let me share from the context of City of Tshwane, because that's where I am. We already had what we called the Green Building Development Policy and Bylaw that was adopted or approved in 2012. By 2018, 5 years had already passed since we had the policy and the bylaw, and we thought of reviewing and updating the policy and the bylaw so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then those discussions then came with other 4 cities, where then they started also developing their own policies. So for this particular policy for City of Tshwane, in the main, the policy is meant to ensure that a sustainable built environment is developed, to incorporate policy and industry best practices updates, deliver on the city's 2050 net zero carbon and climate resilient commitments. And this is also through our climate action plan, which was just approved last year in September by our mayoral committee and council, which also details what is it that the city needs to do to ensure that we get to that net zero and carbon and climate resilient city by 2050. So it's a very comprehensive document that the city has also developed. And lastly is to enhance implementation and enforce compliance with this bylaw that we are currently developing, because it's one thing to be having a very nice document with all the standard in place, but we are unable to implement or enforce it. So enforcement in this case is very key to make sure that we reach our targets. So just to share a bit on, this is high level, so it's just to share on the scope of the policy and the bylaw, what it covers. It covers energy efficiency and net zero carbon. So on that first block, so it will be energy efficiency, renewable energy, and net zero carbon. And we also, over and above the energy aspects, we also included water efficiency, waste management, climate adaptation, and non-motorized transportation, because we think, or we believe that the building sector or the built environment is more comprehensive and inclusive. So we wanted to make sure that we do not only focus on one aspect, but other operational aspects in and around buildings. And with this, as we were busy, we considered, of course, as I said in my previous slides, that we had to consider other regulatory frameworks within the country and within the city, and to make sure that there are best practices that we take as we develop and review our bylaw. And of course, implementation, we had to make sure that the policy and the bylaw are placed in the correct departments, so that those departments then can be responsible for implementation and enforcement of the bylaws. So in this case, for example, in the City of Tshwane, this responsibility will lie with our economic development and special planning department, and in a section called Build Environment and Enforcement. So that's where we deal with mostly with our building plans, etc. So, and also in developing this is not to look away from other social and economic activities, but to ensure that the policy and the bylaw are inclusive, and also it's practical in terms of its implementation, and consider other aspects such as job creation and the like. So in terms of the review process, where we are, or where we started until where we are, we started the process in 2020, late 2020, by doing that research and modeling. And I should mention that we are working with the CSIR in this regard. They are assisting from a scientific point of view. And Sustainable Energy Africa has been key part of the process through the C40 Buildings program, and other partners that were involved in assisting us as cities to be where we are. But this is the process solely for City of Tshwane that we have done. We had very stringent online engagements where we made sure that all the industry's players provide us with input in terms of how to implement and how to review and implement this at the end of it all. And we also had an independent reviewer to look at the reports that we had done that, of course, formed part of the review of the policy and the bylaw, and that happened in 2020 December. The final draft was approved for public participation last year between April and May, and we had that public participation this year on the 23rd of Feb. And for all those that were able to attend, I'm not sure from here who attended, we appreciate the input that you provided us. So we are currently finalizing the incorporation of those comments, and we're hoping that by mid-2020, towards the end of the year, we would have gotten approval from Council in terms of gazetting the bylaw. So just to say, this has been a journey, or it is a journey, and it is going to continue to be a journey, because this is not a one-night thing. It's a process where you need to get everybody involved and make sure that whatever you're putting forward to the public is well informed in terms of different expertise, as I said. So we needed to make sure that we provide an informed work as we work towards this, and we create documents that are easy to understand. Sometimes as sustainability professionals, we get caught into the language that we use when we refer to sustainability or climate change or even net zero. So we wanted to make sure that whatever information we have put in our policies, it's easily relatable. And from our side, actually, we do have the policy and the bylaw in other African languages, not only in English. So at least people in and around the city of Tshwane can be able to understand what this is all about. We had, as I said, very extensive consultations with different stakeholders and through our public participation. And we had also different dialogues in terms of this work to make sure that we get as much input as possible. And what we have done also was to build on a communication and awareness campaign that will inform the public of Tshwane what is happening in terms of the policy and the bylaw, and who should be interested or should be looking forward to implementing the bylaw. And I guess feedback is through the public participation also that we had, and the stakeholder engagement sessions that we had when we were reviewing the bylaw in terms of the feedback that we got. Also, net zero, you can say, is also a new concept, if you like. So it was very important that we also partner with organizations such as the Green Building Council of South Africa, because they do offer different courses that relate to the work that we were doing. So internally, we had to make sure that our officials, especially those that are dealing with building plans, those who will be making sure that the policy and the bylaw are being implemented, we needed to make sure that they are well trained, they are well conversant with the language also. We were able to do some of the training, like, for example, that intro on building energy landscape in South Africa that has been done. And as the SANS10400 Part XA was being reviewed, obviously there were discussions and workshops that we had through Sustainable Energy Africa and other partner organizations. And we also had some training on the Edge 2, because also there has been quite an interest in terms of how then do we merge what we have in terms of SANS and this policies and with Edge. And here we were working, or we got support from Sustainable Energy Africa and IFC. So we were able to get that training. Also the net zero carbon training, we did have that. And I think there are other trainings that are in the pipeline also. So we are still working on conceptualizing those to make sure that all the City of Tshwane officials, and including external stakeholders, are well conversant with the work that we are doing currently. Dash has already touched on this, so I'm not going to go into detail. But as part of the C40's New Buildings program, Ashray, as he said, and eThekwini developed this guide on how to get to net zero. So it's a very useful guide. So it provides the basic concept and know-how of net zero for everyone within the industry, and can help professionals to gear themselves towards this work. In addition to the work, it is important also to ensure that all stakeholders get involved in this process, and that's why we ensure that we share as much as possible on what we are doing. And I guess this influences other dimensions we might have not been able to address in our processes of developing our policies and bylaws. Hence, through Sustainable Energy Africa, there were other stakeholder groups brought into focus on aspects such as financing mechanism and the like. So building towards a consolidated effort for future position and policy statement. So, as cities alone, we cannot do this work. So obviously we would need partners that we can collaborate with so that we have one voice when we also approach national government in terms of implementation. And those engagements have been happening. We've been in contact with all the necessary departments within national government. They are aware of the work that we are doing. So that collaboration has been there to make sure that there is consensus in terms of what we do. Just in closing or in conclusion, so the impact on all of this for professionals, I think it's about educating ourselves as there's a lot of work happening and engaging as much as possible with policymakers and cities and be geared to embrace sustainability in our respective professions. Climate change is a reality. We cannot shy away from it. It's here, and we've seen with the recent floods, and it has become urgent to change the way we build. So we need we need to build better. And for those who are concerned about the cost related to net zero, we've been getting this question a lot. There is no denying that the capital cost will be higher compared to your traditional builds, but studies, are there which showing that costs are going down and buildings that are constructed with sustainability in mind perform better than those built in a traditional way. And long-term financial benefits, health benefits, economic and environmental benefits are evident in most of the green buildings that are already constructed. One other point I should mention is that along policy development by cities, we are also looking at incentives policies. And I know that eThekwini has its incentive policy already. So from our side as City of Tshwane, we are still working on the policy. So we hope by the time the bylaw gets finalized and approved, we should have incentives policy in place. I think that's from me. Thank you very much.
It was very interesting to hear what the City of Tshwane is doing. So guys, now it's over to you and ask some smart questions. I'm gonna go through some of them that were in the chat box and we'll allocate them to the right person. So this one is for Dash, which is from Loki. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It's a question around models, and I guess this then goes to like how do you simulate and do the rational route, and the question is Edge one of these models?
And the answer unfortunately is not yet. At one stage there's a bit more, I recall going on a roadshow to the various building control officers doing an Edge rollouts around kind of how it can link. So it's there, but it's not yet an approved method of approach. So.
And I guess the follow-up question on that is, what are the approved softwares in South Africa? Yeah, and does it have to be Agreement certified?
Okay, yeah. So the second question, the software does need to be Agreement certified, and so I know of 3 different types. So Design Build is what we use to do the rational assessment. So Design Build is one software package. Then there's IES, and then there's also SIMAC, which is another. But there may be others, I'm sure, on the Agreement websites, or there would be the ability to pick up which software is certified to go through this process.
Great. If anyone wants to ask a question, you can also put up your hand and I'll ask you to unmute yourself. So I see there's a hand up from BioLandscape. I assume that's not your name, but you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Oh, yes. Thank you for having me. You speaking to Mabuto who's the Thank you. Who's the founder of BioLandscapes. I am recent in the Eastern Cape, but originally from Pretoria. I am busy with this side of awareness of wetlands, whereby I go around and help people to get knowledge about wetlands and also the benefits of biophilic design, as my company is BioLandscapes. I would like to know, how can such pursuits can the government assist, as I am doing this on my own, to get more awareness around communities that I have or no knowledge at all?
Okay, you were breaking up a little bit, but I assume from what I could hear was you would like an opinion about how we can communicate biophilia to communities?
Yes,
okay,
precisely.
From a government point of view?
Absolutely.
Okay. Kedibone, can I pass this on to you, or do you want me to answer? Or
I can start. Actually, in the city, we are working. I'm from the City Sustainability Unit in the Office of the Executive Mayor, and we work hand in hand with our department called Environment and Agriculture Management, where they mostly deal with management of wetlands. And there is an education element in the department. So, I mean, if that work is happening, obviously, then there can be some level of collaboration in making sure that there is awareness around communities. And through sustainability work that we are doing, we have a what we call Tshwane Green. It's an education and awareness campaign that we have. And I mean, any other idea that it's about educating our communities and making sure that they are very conversant with the protection of the planet, it's welcomed. And I'll just provide my details in the chat, and then I can put you in touch with colleagues from environment in terms of how we can then make sure that is escalated across.
Okay, thank you so much, Modiselle. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your question. Loki, I see your hand is up twice.
It's actually only once. It's actually a question for Dash with regards, and you're pronouncing it correct for change. Funny that one.
Good.
You've mentioned some softwares, which is what you guys were using, and I haven't got my reading glasses on, but it's Design Builder is the one, and then IS and SyncPack. So I've been doing sustainable design probably for about 30 years. I started with a book that was issued by Sunset Books way back in the 70s already. And I've always tried to employ those principles because to me that was an important part of building. However, I find that I've done a couple of courses. I've done the Edge course. I've done the course that was presented by US Green, you know, getting all these certificates that you can stick on the wall. But there's nothing that is actually putting us in a position where we're actually implementing it. Because, for example, I do a lot of alterations to houses. My main business is actually restaurants, which there is no cure for. So when it comes to adding on a section to a house, council, they say to you, you've got to make sure it's green, but they're only concentrating on fenestation. And that's basically the only thing that they're doing. If you look at the models that you get for the design software as such, the stuff that US Green is doing is actually brilliant, and it gives you far more information. So this is the first time that I've heard of Design Builder. Now, there's no, how can I say, there's no training on these software. And one stage I said, yeah, you can bring it into your business and make it part of your business. I, on the other hand, have found that people are not concerned about it. They know the average Joe in the street who wants a bedroom built on, he can't be bothered about how you go about it.
Yeah, I guess that endpoint is the tricky parts to this, and I think this is the importance of kind of sharing this vision that the world needs to join in on, and the difficulty around that. I mean, I know as soon as it becomes a personal thing, like building your own house, you want what you perceive as being the best solution, and that is maybe not accounting for the energy associated costs which may come in down the line. You want that big glazing, you want this thing to look a certain way, but the impacts of that aren't fully realized. So you want big glass, but you're facing north and there's no shading. Thermal discomfort is like, guaranteed in that space. Maybe it's even going to be overly bright. So I know that it's maybe a hard sell to convince that client, but I think the importance is that at least the conversation is had. And I think that's the problem often, is that the standard, so if we go to SANS, the standard allows you to deviate and go for sometimes these buildings that actually don't make sense. And so it's really about trying, and now with these reduced benchmarks, trying to convey this message that we need to be better, that design needs to go back to how it was, that it needs to have passive design elements as part of its design, and it's not just sticking something on to deal with that impact, that energy impact that comes up there. So I don't know. To answer your question, though, the software packages that are there is also another barrier. I know that's another comment that was raised, is that one of the challenges is that you need to have someone who's competent, who can deem themselves competent to be able to do a rational assessment and submit that report into council to have that report approved. So there's a barrier immediately as well on that front. So as much as the SANS standard is meant to be applied nationally and improve that the energy efficiency of buildings at a national scale, if the reliance is on a very select number of competent persons, then how do you achieve that scale? And so that's maybe a limitation as well. So sorry, I don't know, I rambled on there a bit. Hopefully in that there was an answer to your question and comments.
Sorry, yeah, it does to a degree. The thing that I'm trying to get to is I'd like to get my business more aligned with, being in a position where we can certify and do that portion of the work for people. But you're blocked on every corner. I mean, I've been in touch with Green Council SA. They have the conversation with you, but that's where it stays. And the problem is I'm 63. So at this point in my life to do a career change, it's daunting. So my thing is, how do you get to a point where you can say, listen, my business is geared for issuing you with a certificate that is actually the one that we need to, or surely, you're going to find a site that is not compliant, and then you can give them the solutions to that. But at the start of the day, when you go to somebody and say, I'm a sustainable design consultant, and they look at you like you're crazy. You tell them I'm a senior architectural technologist, and they're quite happy to talk to you.
Yeah.
The questions, I understand it's vague, but I need to be in a, I think what would be good, Dash, is if you can maybe drop your email for us and we can be in touch, have a conversation.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think in the presentation slides that are going to be shared with everybody, there'll be my contact details. So definitely happy to take this conversation and take it further.
Okay. Great, thanks, Loki, for that question. I see there's a hand from Francois.
Hello, thank you. I'm Francois Swanepoel. I just want to add to the conversation and the response that Dash gave, and I'm in the same position as I didn't catch the name of the person that asked the question, but what isn't the solution is for us to, as architectural designers and architects, to partner with people that has the qualifications and the software and collaborate with them on these projects, so that we can still offer to our clients in our market these services. I also don't have the resources to learn the software and to go into a whole educational process of learning that proficiency of energy evaluation and assessments. So then we get in consultants to partner with us and work on a project and get the best solution to the client.
And I guess whenever it comes to sustainable building, it's a collaboration of all participants in the building design team as well. Yeah, so I agree with you, Francois, and I think also like the technical side, the modeling side is a very technical side, whereas architects are much more on the creative side, right? So it's not necessarily you as architects have to like start understanding that modeling. You can use the outputs of that modeling into the design of the building. And some of those outputs, I mean, I'm an architect by training, and in our company, Solid Green, we have the more architectural side, and we have the technical side, and we, the one inputs from the other, and together you come to the best solutions for the project team.
Yeah, that's right. And as an architect, having an energy efficiency focus in your design, you consult with your specialist. That informs the design from an early stage. The earlier that you do that, the better your design outcome will be and the better the performance of the building. So it is a collaborative process.
Absolutely.
Of however many stakeholders you can involve in that process as early on as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah.
Okay, I see there's a hand from Janice.
I'm actually having this very experience right now as an architect. So it's all very well in large developments where there's a lot more money to throw at it. But when you're doing, I mean, residential sectors, we saw the impact is huge if the buildings aren't designed energy efficiently. But those are the very buildings where the client, if you say to them, look, actually, we need to outsource a rational design now, and that's another fee. They're like, whoa, wasn't expecting that. And it's sort of all happened quite quickly. And a colleague of mine, for example, bought some of the software, but he can't get it to work in terms of he's not sure what he's doing with it. And then I found somebody, she actually is a professional architect, but she's made this her business to do rational designs. So it just feels like it's not as easy to implement. There are too many obstacles right now. And I'm not sure if there's a way, maybe through SACUP, there should be some kind of education that you don't have to just keep paying for everything, because, as we heard from some of the other architects, they don't all have the resources to buy the software and do training. And the clients are reluctant to pay more when they're small residential clients or smaller, not developers. I don't know if Dash can answer that.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, to that, there's also, it's what this costs and what it seems to cost, and if that fee is where it sits, if it's from the architect side, or if it's set up front that this is split and the client is fully aware from the get-go. But there is potential savings in this process as well, and that should be known. Sometimes you can, get away sounds bad, but there's a way of, if you don't have an R value of 3.7 and it's only 3, that there's a saving on your insulation, and your performance is still good. Your energy performance and thermal comfort is still being met, but you have this reduced level of insulation. Or if that same thinking is applied to the glazing, that you rationalize how you're approaching glazing, and so there's savings that can be kind of taken through into the project from a build perspective as well. So sometimes the fees are looked at they're looked at as just fees, but they're not looked at comprehensively across the full build. I mean, if we extend what we typically do, there's the rational assessment approach, which is going to council and approval. But then there's also the performance modeling approach, and that's really to go into that detail and kind of be able to make sure that building is performing as efficiently as it can be, to realize some of those. Okay, maybe it's again looking at this more comprehensively, the operational savings that would come into the building's operation as well. So yes, there are fees. We do have fees. That's just reality of it. But I think if these things are looked at comprehensively, they can be seen to not be the barrier. Then it's also you still also want to make sure. So this maybe to the second part of the slight barrier because of these different simulation software packages and how to actually get someone who can do it. Unfortunately, there needs to be this barrier as well, because you don't want just everybody using software that they just go through this process and input the incorrect information into the simulation software, but get these great results out, and it's seemingly good, but at the end of the day, it's actually didn't achieve anything. So that's to be understood as well. Like, there is a competency in that space for a reason, and that should not be overlooked, because that feedback has real world impacts.
Thanks, Dash. Now, I'm actually almost suggesting that SACAP, but maybe that's my thing with them, should be offering their some training, not at huge fees, so that we can offer the service competently.
Okay, I'm gonna cut you there, Dash and Janice, because I want to get one last question through. But maybe Dash, put your details in the chat below, or in the chat box, and then if people have further questions for Dash, you can reach out to him. I just want to ask one last question here from Tulani, who has asked the question, and now I can't find it anymore, which is a question for Okkie. In determining success, what is your view of an overall industry target? And then let that be aspirational as opposed to a subjective target aiming low.
Yes, Modiselle. So it's an interesting question. I think the industry is so broad that to set a specific target really is difficult. But the target at the end of the day should be zero. We want to reach net zero, and it's not impossible. The processes are still being developed. The technology is in place, so it's not impossible, but it is a process. I've left my details in the chat. We don't have much time left, but Tulani, feel free to give me a call or drop me a mail, and we can discuss.
Great, thank you for that. And then there's a lot of interesting comments and questions in the chat, so thank you all for participating in that chat box. I'm gonna just go through the last slides of today before I'm gonna let you guys go. We have some upcoming events next month. It's around regenerative permaculture, or at least we're still like defining the topic a little bit, but like it's going to be around that. And then in June, we're going to have a book review, a book by Wayne Visser, which is called Thriving, the Breakthrough Movement to Regenerate Nature, Society and the Economy. And I started reading it yesterday, and it's a really interesting book, I must say. If you get a chance to read it before then, that would be great. Google it, and otherwise I'll be interviewing him, so don't stress too much about it. And then in July, we're going to do a session around the One Planet framework. So that's also probably going to be a more interactive session, so keep up to date. If you're following us on Eventbrite, where you're registered for this webinar, you will get notifications if we load up the new registration for the new event. So if you follow us there, you won't miss any of our events going forward. And then again, a big thank you from the Regenerative Collaborative. If you're keen to join us and help us and volunteer with us, that would be great. We're all volunteers. We're all doing this for the love of the regenerative design and getting the word out there. So if you feel like you have some special skills in IT, uploading webinars, making the videos look good, all that kind of stuff, please let us know. We would love to have you on board. So with that, I'm going to say a really big thank you to our sponsor, Schneider Electric. We really appreciate your contribution and making it possible to offer CPD points for our webinar. We really appreciate it, and thank you very, very much. Then thank you to our speakers, Dash, Okkie and Kedibone. Really nice presentations, each of you on quite a different topic, but all of them very, very interesting. I think we need to consider doing one on XA only, and because it seemed that was like a lot of questions were asked around that. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon and being with us. And then a big thank you to our team of volunteers that making these webinars possible and doing all the work behind the scenes and organizing and doing all the admin. We really appreciate your input and your work and time dedicated to the Regenerative Collaborative. And so lastly, I'm going to thank you for attending, for following us. I saw a lot of people that have been following us and attending a lot of the other webinars. We really appreciate it, and we hope you have a really nice evening, and we hope to see you again in May. Thank you very, very much.